Once they held rifles, now they hold shovels. Once they fought on the front lines, now they fight for the land. This is the untold story of how Captain Ibrahim Traoré did the impossible.
I am Ibrahim Traoré.
He turned warriors into farmers. Burkina Faso, a land ravaged by terrorism, poverty, and decades of exploitation, had become a battleground. Young men with no jobs, no hope, no food, were easy targets for warlords, militias, and foreign-funded chaos. But then came a man who didn't just promise peace, he offered purpose. Traoré knew, if a gun gives power to the hopeless, then land gives something greater, identity. So, he launched a silent revolution. It wasn't announced on global news, it didn't involve flashy headlines. But in the rural heart of Burkina Faso, the real change began. He started with the fighters, men who had spent years in violence, some with scars, others with blood on their hands. Traoré didn't punish them, he called them to rebuild. "You've protected this land," he said. "Now it's time to feed it." They were given land, seeds, training, and most importantly, dignity. Military camps were turned into farming villages. AK-47s were swapped for plows, and the first harvest, it fed thousands. Not imported, not donated, grown by the hands that once only knew war. The project spread. Each region formed what Traoré called Green Brigades, units of ex-combatants now dedicated to agriculture, irrigation, and local food markets. It wasn't just farming, it was healing, and people started noticing. Women returned to abandoned villages. Children, once hiding from gunfire, now ran through wheat fields. The same fields that were once battle zones now fed the nation. And when asked why he did it, Traoré answered simply, "Because bullets cannot grow bread." And that's when the world realized this wasn't just a military leader, this was a visionary. In a time where most leaders invested in arms, he invested in soil. While others beg for foreign aid,
if the president is unable to act, his powers are exercised by the first vice president and, if necessary, by the second vice president.
He built independence, one seed at a time. The West stayed silent, because a peaceful, self-reliant Africa, that's not part of their plan. But Traoré didn't care. He didn't wait for approval. He didn't ask for applause. He just kept planting. And today, thousands of men, once called rebels, criminals, insurgents, now wake at sunrise to farm. They feed their families. They protect their soil. They build their future. Not with war, but with work. And maybe that's the greatest revolution of all. Soon the Green Brigades weren't just farming, they were teaching. Traoré ordered that each farming zone train the next generation. Teenagers who once idolized militants now followed ex-fighters into fields. They learned not just how to plant, but how to reclaim dignity without violence. And something powerful happened. Where war once divided villages, agriculture united them. Ethnic tensions began to fade. Hausa, Mossi, Fulani, all working the same land side by side. And the land responded. Deserts slowly turned green. Abandoned wells were reopened. Solar-powered irrigation systems replaced foreign-sponsored dependency projects. One ex-fighter said, "I killed for survival. Now I grow food, and I sleep for the first time in peace." International observers were stunned. NGOs didn't know how to label it, because this wasn't charity. It was change from within. And the man behind it all still refused interviews, still wore the same uniform, still walked through the mud when visiting farms. Because to him, this wasn't PR, it was personal. He said, "The same hands that broke this land will be the ones to heal it." And he was right. Burkina Faso's food imports dropped. Local markets boomed. Families once torn apart by violence now gathered at harvest festivals, with music, prayer, and pride. Even neighboring countries took notice. Delegates from Mali, Niger, and Chad began visiting the Green Brigades. They asked for training, for seeds, for strategy, and Traoré shared everything for free. because he believed a free Africa doesn't compete, it cooperates. And so the idea spread, from guns to green, from soldiers to sowers, from survival to sovereignty. The most dangerous thing Traore did wasn't fighting the West. It was proving that peace was possible without them, that war wasn't our only destiny, that even in the poorest, most broken corners of the Muslim world, transformation was still possible, not through blood, but through belief. And now, every time a seed is planted in Burkina Faso, it plants a question in the minds of millions. If they can do it, why can't we? By the start of 2025, Burkina Faso had done what no one thought possible. It fed itself. Not with food imports flown in by Western planes, but with crops grown by hands that once pulled triggers. And for the first time in decades, the headlines began to shift, quietly, reluctantly. Burkina Faso's agricultural miracle. From conflict to cultivation, a new African model? But for Traore, it was never about headlines. He was building something deeper, a psychological revolution. Because when a man who once lived by the gun learns to make the earth bloom, he doesn't just change the land, he changes himself. And this transformation began spreading. Fighters from Niger crossed the border, not with bullets, but with buckets and boots, asking to join. Villagers in Mali sent letters. Send us a green brigade. Teach us to plant like you. And perhaps the most shocking moment of all, former enemies, even those who had once fought against Traore's forces, laid down their weapons, just to pick up seeds. This wasn't just reform, it was redemption. And the West? They didn't know how to react, because sanctions can crush banks, propaganda can shape minds, but how do you fight a farmer planting hope? You can't bomb a harvest, you can't sanction a seed, you can't silence a man who speaks through crops instead of microphones. And so, they tried something else. Silence. Western media stopped covering him. Think tanks dismissed it as temporary. But deep down they knew, if other African nations followed this model, if broken men could be rebuilt through purpose, if farming became a symbol of power, not poverty, then their control would rot like an old empire left in the sun. Traore once said, "We are not just planting food, we are planting a new story, one where Africa feeds itself, heals itself, and no longer fears itself." And maybe that's the greatest revolution. Not a bloody coup, not a fiery speech, but a quiet man, teaching fighters to farm. And through that soil, growing a nation's soul back. As the seasons passed, something remarkable began to bloom beyond the fields, a cultural awakening. Where once young boys dreamed of picking up guns, they now dreamed of picking up hoes, axes, and tractors. Rappers in Ouagadougou started writing verses about farming. Local filmmakers documented the Green Brigades like heroes in war films. But this time, the battles were against drought, not enemies. One of the most viral clips online? A former rebel commander teaching a 9-year-old how to plant onions. In the background, a sign read, "From destruction to cultivation. This is our jihad." Yes, they called it jihad. Not in the way misunderstood by the world, but in its truest sense, the struggle to rebuild, to resist oppression through life, not death. And across the Muslim world, scholars took notice. Friday sermons in Dakar, Khartoum, even Karachi started mentioning Traore. Some called him Al-Falah al-Mujahid, the farmer warrior, because what he had done was reshape the idea of masculinity. He proved that a real man doesn't just defend his home with a gun, he feeds it with his own hands. Burkina Faso became more than a country, it became a blueprint, and not just for Africa, for all post-conflict Muslim societies. Could ex-Taliban fighters in Afghanistan farm again? Could ex-militias in Syria grow wheat instead of hate? Could Gaza, one day, plant olive trees without fear of bulldozers? These weren't fantasies anymore. Because in a forgotten corner of West Africa, it was already happening. And still, Traore remained humble. No palaces, no billion-dollar deals, just dusty boots, cracked hands, and a voice that kept repeating, "If we can grow food on blood-soaked soil, we can grow peace anywhere." And maybe, just maybe, the most powerful thing you can do in a world addicted to war is to plant something and walk away from the battlefield toward the garden. Real change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it grows, quietly, from the ground up. If this story inspired you, like, share, and subscribe.